Madam President, I rise today in support of the Paycheck Fairness Act. Equal pay for equal work is the law of the land. It has been for over 50 years. Yet the law is one thing, and the reality is quite another. Women still get paid far less than men for the same work. Last year, Hawaii News Now, a TV station in Hawaii, shared the story of a woman in Honolulu. She had been asking for a raise for over a year to no avail. Her employers acknowledged that she was underpaid, but they didn't do anything about it. Then she found out a new male hire with less experience would be paid $5,000 more to do the same job. She is not alone. In Hawaii, a woman makes on average 83 cents for every dollar a man makes. While that's better than the national average, it's still not equal pay for equal work. Research shows that the gender gap in pay begins with a woman's first job and widens from there. So when a young woman graduates and takes her place in the workplace, her starting line is already behind that of her male colleagues. That makes it harder for her to catch up, no matter how hard she works. And the women I know, they work incredibly hard, and many of them are heads of households and sole breadwinners, which makes the pay inequality that much tougher for them. The gender pay gap persists even for workers with the same level of experience and education. The gap is even wider for older women. Congress passed the Equal Pay Act over 50 years ago. As I said earlier, this is the law of the land. Yet the pay gap persists. And while the gap has shrunk, not by much, women only earn 77 cents on the dollar nationally. As Senator Mikulski often says, in 50 years, women have only gained a few cents. In 2009, I was proud to support and vote for the Lilly Ledbetter Act, which President Obama signed into law. It was the very first bill that he signed into law upon his election. Without this law, women had only 180 days after their first discriminatory paycheck to challenge it, even if they only found out about it years and years later. After all, Lilly's employer did not announce that they were discriminating against her in pay. So in her case, it took many years, and she was far beyond the 180 days that the Supreme Court said would be the time frame in which she could try to get redress. So while the Lilly Ledbetter Act addressed one part of the equal pay problem, if we're going to make sure that all women get a fair shot, we need to pass the Paycheck Fairness Act. This bill will require employers to prove that pay gaps between men and women are based only on a business reason and not on gender. The Paycheck Fairness Act will make it easier for workers to compare their salaries and figure out whether they're victims of discrimination. Right now, without this act, employers can still fire workers just for sharing the basic information about how much they're getting paid. This bill would strengthen penalties for companies that discriminate against women. It would bring class action protection for women in line with other civil rights laws. The bill includes an exemption for small businesses and a phase-in time for businesses to learn what they are required to do. In addition, the Paycheck Fairness Act will help prevent pay discrimination in the first place by providing training for both management and workers. This past April 8th was Equal Pay Day. That's the day when women's earnings in this country caught up with men's earnings from the previous year. In other words, it took women 16 months to catch up with what their male counterparts were making in 12 months. The very next day, here on the Senate floor, every single Republican senator voted to filibuster the Paycheck Fairness Act, which failed on a procedural vote. I hope that our Republican friends will reconsider their position on this important issue this time around. This year, President Obama signed an executive order to implement parts of the Paycheck Fairness Act for federal contractors. And that's a major step forward for thousands of women. But there are millions more who aren't covered by this executive action. Today, in the Senate, we have another chance to give the women of our country a fair shot. Another chance for us to live up to a law that we passed 50 years ago. I urge my colleagues to pass the Paycheck Fairness Act without delay. 50 years is long enough to wait.